Hi, my name is Heather from Bridge Raise. We are corporate fundraising specialists. We help charities raise more money from companies. And I am so pleased today to be joined by Farrah, where we're going to talk about how corporate volunteering strengthens partnerships. If you are live with me here, please do put a note in the chat and feel free to ask any questions. If we don't have a chance to get to them on our live recording, I will absolutely follow up with answers after. We love hearing from you. So as all of you who know me well know, I love corporate volunteering as part of a tactic to strengthen corporate partnerships. And Farrah and I got talking about this over the last few months, and I love what she has to say about this topic. So happy to have her here. So Farrah, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and let people know, what you're all about.
Oh, thank you so much, Heather, and I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So as you said, I'm Farrah. I help lead corporate citizenship here at Volunteer Canada. So Volunteer Canada is the national body for volunteering in this country. And where I sort of sit is really on the intersection between nonprofits and corporations, and helping build those bridges through volunteering to promote resilient communities, and also to help corporations move the needle forward in the work that they're interested in doing. And also, just a side note, I'm also really passionate about technology. So those three pieces is my sweet spot.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So and I mean, now we need to be good at technology to do almost anything, including volunteerism. So I'm glad to hear that you're thinking that way.
Yeah.
Where I'd like to start is, I think we all kind of know what volunteerism is, or volunteering is in our communities and things like that. But in this case, we are talking about corporate volunteering. So tell me, like, from your point of view, like, what does that mean? How do you define that? And I know that we use a ton of terms. Honestly, I use employee engagement or employee volunteerism. So tell me a little bit about what you think of when you say corporate volunteerism.
Yeah, and you're right. There's so many different terms. I mean, we often use the term employer-supported volunteerism. So what that really means is places of business or corporations supporting their employees to volunteer. And that shows up in a multitude of different ways, depending on the goals of the program, depending on the goals of the corporate purpose programs. Even just that, we're like, what do we call it now? Social purpose, ESG, CSR, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, so many different terms, but yeah, it can show up in lots of different ways. The maturity of the program, sophistication of the program. So it can really be the whole gamut. It can look like, a Dollars for Doers program, where employees that volunteer either after work on their own time, or during an allotted time that they're given to volunteer during the work time, during the workday. They'll go and if they entered into the system, the company will donate money to that charity. It could be, more formal group volunteering activities where a group of 10 people go, and it's all sort of organized either during work or after hours. Or it could be pro bono work. It could be ongoing opportunities. So it's really, what it really means at its heart is that it's volunteering that is either that is supported by the corporation in some way, or is organized by the corporation in some way, encourage the organization or the company in some way.
Love that. Okay, that's really helpful, because it does, put a lot of breadth to what we're talking about in terms of what this can look like. So, I would say that corporate volunteerism, or employee-supported volunteerism, it has always been a thing, but it's certainly like not going away. It's very much a part of what companies are choosing to do to support their nonprofit partners. Tell me a little bit about this from the big picture. Like, what are you seeing when we talk about this, like from companies?
Yeah. So I work a lot, I would say almost exclusively with companies across Canada. So I very much, although, my background is in nonprofits and we do a lot of work with nonprofits, I really sit with the companies and support them through thought leadership or through supporting their programs or, communities of practice, etc. So this is really my world. And, what we are seeing right now from a big picture is a sea change. And I think it's a good sea change in the social purpose space. This is still a fairly new industry. I guess we can even call it an industry. And 10, 15 years ago, or even 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, there really wasn't formalized social purpose work. There wasn't really formalized social purpose teams. As a practice, it wasn't really formalized. And then we kind of went through, as we saw, culturally, we saw, a big swing towards progressive causes with Black Lives Matter, Me Too. We really saw a push, like the huge, the environmental apocalypse that where we find ourselves in, where companies were like, okay, we really have to invest in this. And which was a reflection of what we were seeing again in our culture, right? Like this is remember those early Dove campaigns and all of those pieces. Now, we're seeing a swing, a more conservative swing coming back. We're seeing, that socially there's some pullback from where we were progressively. And I think what's happening and how that's being reflected in the corporate world is that companies are realizing that this social purpose work is still incredibly important to their bottom line. It's still incredibly important to be making money because we are in a capitalist world. But it can't just be done on the side of a desk anymore. It can't just be done as a nice to have, because if the culture is reacting or shareholders are reacting in a certain way, it's just too easy to cut. So what companies are doing is they're actually looking to integrate social purpose and employee volunteering or employer-led volunteering definitely falls into that. They're looking at integrating this into their actual business lines. So they're looking at, employee-led volunteering as serving their key, business goals. So that could be around employee engagement, that can be around skills development, that can be around, building team integration, leadership, all of those pieces. But they're starting to sort of repivot, and it's a sea change that we're looking at companies caring about this on a very integrated level in their business. And so it's a great opportunity for nonprofits to go, okay, how can we pivot, or how they're not even pivot, but how can we start thinking and partnering with corporations so that we can mutually support each other's goals.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, one of the things that I often talk about, like having a corporate value proposition, and this is even like being specific to corporate, really thinking about that piece. How do you communicate your ability to meet their objectives as part of it? I want to flip this a little bit, because I know one of the things that answer sounded, or that piece sounded very corporate centric, but I know that one of the things that you really prioritize too when you're talking about it is making it meaningful for both parties. So how do charities think about it from their perspective, like meaningful volunteer opportunities that are meaningful for them and meaningful for the company?
Yeah, I mean, I think a key part of that is and this sort of sounds almost like a bit like, we're playing 4D chess, but in order for it to be meaningful to the corporation, it has to be meaningful to the charity, right? Because it's at the end of the day, it's all about impact, and it's all about moving the needle forward for our communities, right? And so, and I think that's something that corporations we're working on it and they're getting better at learning. But they do need to, they do need to really learn that at the end of the day, what is of the utmost importance is really what the charity needs. So, when I'm thinking about, talking about nonprofits who have built successful programs or doing this in successful ways, it's it's about the charity, the nonprofit, doing some thinking around how volunteer labor can really support moving their goals forward, and that can look like a whole bunch of different things, right? It can be anything from, cleaning a closet. It could be, which sounds crazy, but I have been in a group volunteering activity where like, hey, can we get 5 people and can we just go clean this closet right now? And they were like, yes, we would love to do that. It can look like virtual volunteering where somebody can go in and provide some strategy around a social, social media campaign or pro bono work. But really, I think what corporations want is they want it to be impactful and they want to make a difference. And so it's key for, charities who are looking to do this work to really go, okay, how can we bring in volunteers that actually like move the needle on what we need to do? And honestly, like that can look like building a ramp. So your facility is more, accessible. It can look like it doesn't necessarily have to be like a big, huge thing, just impactful. And then being able to tell that story, right? Like, why would it be a huge impact to build a ramp? Like, why would it be a huge impact to clean something out? Like, why would it have a huge impact to do this? Now, I know, and I get it. Like, I used to be a peer-to-peer fundraising manager. I absolutely get the power of peer-to-peer fundraising, and how I like to call them is volunteer fundraisers, because at the end of the day, they're doing labor for you, and that is an important piece of the puzzle, but and definitely, like when you're building out your sponsorship packages or your your philanthropic packages around your events, volunteering and peer-to-peer fundraising is a big part of it. But I think companies are often looking for opportunities that move the needle for the work that the charity is doing as well. So, when I have conversations with charities, a lot of times that's sort of the first thing that comes to mind, like, oh, we need someone to help out at our gala. And we sort of challenge them to think, okay, what are there other opportunities that are really core to your business, like the charitable business, that can kind of move the needle on impact, that aligns with some of the goals that your corporations also see, like, again, skills development, mentoring, all of those pieces, or hey, just like getting out and team building by building a ramp together.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you say that. Because revenue is such an important piece to people, so it makes sense that they want peer-to-peer to be a part of it. And I think, like, I always encourage that, to be, maybe it can be a piece of it as opposed to the only thing. One of the things that I see working too is figuring out what I would call almost an education version of volunteerism. Like, can the charity turn some of their things into an educational opportunity for some of the employees, and then they, maybe spread the message of that work. And I think that makes sense sometimes with organizations that have sort of a combination advocacy or a social change element. Like, if part of their mandate is to change behaviors in society, then, educating large numbers of employees on those things is sort of part of their mandate. And so I sometimes think that that's a cool way to think about employee volunteerism, having some kind of educational spread thing, as opposed to it being asking their network for money. Like, can you ask their network to understand better this community of people?
Fundraising, right? As we call it, fundraising, not fundraising. Yeah, no, 100%. And that's a really important piece of the puzzle. In fact, we just met with a large tech company yesterday, and we're organizing, doing a webinar in advance of their program, where we're talking about the charitable causes, and also just like how to volunteer and how to, you know, get involved. But yeah, that's a really great point. Like, how can we create ambassadors and, you know, and advocates for our work through that. So like, yeah, that's another really great, I mean, you can just go into a company and do a small like kit building, or do a small, you know, something small, and then do a big educational, you know, component around it. That's a really exciting, option.
Way to make it, like, just because to make it more robust, right? When if what you have as an activity is not, you know, big enough from the length of time it's going to take, I think sometimes that can work to round it out. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is, well, let me think, where do I want to go? Yeah, so you definitely are seeing this as a core priority amongst companies, that a lot of them are asking for this. Do we have any like data or specific examples that really demonstrate how this is showing up for companies?
Yeah, I mean, when we sort of talked about this a little bit before, I did some thinking, and there is one actually pretty big example of a large company in Canada, and they are a retailer, very large retailer in Canada, and they really, I don't want to be talking absolutes where it's like only, but they prioritize partnering with charities where they could have volunteering opportunities. Now, with them, and I think there is some things that we can learn, you know, from the nonprofit side, by looking at this example. So with them, they have a very defined impact scope. So they have a very defined, it's broad, but like they have a very defined, like they work with youth homelessness, and that's what they do. And so they have, because they're a real retailer, they also have like a very focused customer base, and they have a very focused employee base, right? That all sort of aligns. And so it makes sense for them to find this opportunity. So for a charity, if you're looking to you know, if you fit within that scope, and you understand who their customer base is, and you understand what their needs are, and how they can support you, it becomes a lot sort of easier to, when you enter into those sort of partnership conversations, to go, okay, like we can, you know, and it doesn't need to be a big, huge volunteering thing, right? It can be like, you can come in and do like these 3 things, or we need help with this, or just like having a conversation and being ready to, and this is actually a big part, like being ready to accept a group volunteer, or a group of volunteers, like, you know, and having your sort of admin pieces in place to accept that. So being ready, and then having an opportunity or a volunteering piece that aligns with what they, you know, the potential partner needs, and it can absolutely happen. And then you have a relationship, and always there should be a donation involved, or there should be some financial piece involved. If you're ever bringing in a group volunteer, or a group that's volunteering, especially from a corporation, you should always ask for a donation. And they should be best practices. They should be providing that to you. And in that one example, that company, they will always provide a honorarium as well. And it's almost always approved. So it's just a matter of like understanding who the company is, you know, where are they at, what they care about, and then finding some opportunities for alignment there. And the best way that can happen is just through conversations and talking. Yeah.
I could not agree more. I think I just want to recap that, because I think one of what you sort of, we were wound around to a question I really wanted to ask. So I want to make sure people get this around, like, what what is it to be ready for this? And absolutely knowing how you align with the company's CSR buckets or community investment priorities, if they have those, is to me a definite best practice. And then having that admin and making it easy. At Bridgeraise, we always talk about how do you make being your partner easy for them and easy for you too, because over time, if you're introducing a few companies into this, like getting a little bit of a system in place so that you know how they're going to go through the process so it feels very smooth, are just some of the ways that make you best practice in this area, right? That if you can, excuse me, align and then have a good activity and then make the admin smooth, to me, that's like.
Yeah. And the one I would say, I mean, this seems obvious, but it actually is like, it's a pain and it can be an absolute deal breaker for working with corporations, is the activity almost always has to happen on a weekday. That is like often if it can't happen on a weekday, it makes it so much harder to activate. Yeah. And like things like transportation, right? Like, because corporate folks are coming from all over. You know, in the work that we do, we often will arrange transportation. But definitely I would probably say, if someone was to ask me, like, what's the biggest deal breaker for working with corporations? I mean, you know, of course, fit and all of those things. But if we're looking at a weekday.
Right, a weekday. So when you're thinking about getting your plans together, these are a few things to think about. And I think on the money side, I'm also a very, very strong proponent of there needs to be an investment. And I don't even use donation language because I think, you know what, a donation doesn't require this level of work on the part of the charity. I think if I so often hear charities fall into the trap of saying yes to accepting companies and they're like, we'll ask for money later. And I'm like, no, like right up front at the beginning, first conversation, you need to be saying part of this for us is that you're making an investment in us, whether we use donation language or a per head amount, or like there's different financial models, and I support those different financial models being put in place. But I really think it is undervalues the role that the charity plays in this to make it an afterthought. Oh, you can give us a donation if you want to. Like if we're going to position the charities as a really good partner in this activity, then this is an activity that's of value to the company. That means there should be a financial investment. And I know that you talk to the companies about that as well. And I really encourage charities to stand in that positioning, because we know that volunteerism is a very valuable activity for their employees to participate in. There's all sorts of data about that. I know that you are aware of, and that is out there to say, like, that helps with loyalty, it helps with recruitment, it helps with all, like, culture, it helps with all these
venture
things.
capital, like stakeholders, all of it. Yeah.
All of it, right? There's so many ways this helps the company. And so it is worth them making an investment in the charity, given that the charity is going to have to do extra things to make sure the experience is meaningful and smooth and all those things. So I can't double click on that enough. It's really, really important.
Yeah. And I would even go, 100%. And just a quick note too, that we are talking about, when we're talking about honorariums or whatnot, we are talking, well, it can be in a bunch of ways, but just to kind of read between the lines, we are sort of talking about a specific sort of group volunteering, where like a 10, however many people kind of go and have an experience. And I would even go further and say that I would argue that this is actually service delivery, and that you're actually providing a service to the company. It is a win-win, but at the end of the day, it's a service, in that, like, you are providing, again, like to your point, like they are getting a whole bunch of ticks. I don't want to speak in universals, but in a large majority of the cases, that the honorarium that it is provided is not even like tax, or it's not even qualifies for a charitable
Yeah.
receipt, because they do get service in exchange for it. So just even going like a step further, being a little bit thoughtful about providing a tax receipt for that, and like, what does that mean? And just like, if you're starting to go along these lines, like it might be worth talking to your lawyer, your legal counsel, to sort of determine, is it tax receivable or is it? And it very might well be tax receivable. I don't want to speak in absolutes, but.
Yeah, no, that's a good flag for everybody. And we do flag that too when we're talking about the guidelines that we put in place in organizations, that there needs to be intentionality, right? It may or may not have a tax receipt, but let's make sure that we're intentional about making the decision on that. And we've got expert advice to know what is correct in that case. We're about to run out of time, so I want to close the loop here. We've given some people some really good strategies, I think, around alignment, being thoughtful on the activities, making it administratively easy, being broad about what you think about when you think about volunteerism, that there's lots of options there. So I really appreciate that. I want to hone in on, if you were going to say, hey, they haven't done it and now they're going to, what would you suggest would be the best place to start with all of those different ideas kind of floating around?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things. I mean, if you're looking at sort of less practicality and more just like, okay, what are companies thinking? How can we start thinking about equitable partnerships around volunteering and philanthropy? Imagine Canada has some really great, and I just have some really great white papers coming out. Advancing purpose-driven partnerships between business and community organizations. There's a new one that just dropped. Lots of interesting pieces in there. Bridging perspectives and nonprofit views of corporate social impact in Canada is another one that just came out a few months ago. So there's some really interesting sort of pieces in there. Volunteer Canada, we don't have anything formal for our nonprofit folks yet, but we are working on developing some resources next year, because we do get a lot of questions around that. And we're always open and available if anyone wants to just drop us a line and we can have a quick chat. And Heather, I know that you do really great work around this as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. For anybody who wants to be in touch with me, I do have those Imagine Canada resource links. I've shared them with my community before because I do think they're really strong. And of course, we'll stay in touch with Farrah and the Volunteer Canada team. And I encourage you to follow her on LinkedIn and just be aware of what Volunteer Canada is doing. They've got lots of work happening to strategize on the volunteer infrastructure across Canada, both with companies and with our individuals. That's coming up.
Yeah.
So valuable.
I'm sorry to interrupt. And also, I just almost totally forgot. We do have so we do actually work with corporations in providing group or employee supported volunteering activations. So absolutely, we work with charities right across Canada that already have these programs sort of developed, because we have companies that come to us all the time and they're like, hey, we want to work with you to develop these activations. So if you do have a program and it's sort of ready to go, and and our scope is really national. So our sweet spot is we have companies that often work across Canada, and they're like, we want 5 activations in 5 different cities, and we want to do, and we can just manage all of that for them. So that's get in touch if you think you might be a great partner for us.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for that offer. I love seeing that there's different ways that charities can activate this way. Thanks so much for your time today, Farrah.
Thank you.
Again, if people have questions, don't hesitate to put them in and we will follow up. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.